Hey everyone. So, a lot of you know that I'm a big fanatic when it comes down to family history. And I think that is also what inspires me to do what I do as it relates to African American music history. Because I'm a firm believer that communities shape people, whether through the sounds we make, through the decisions we make, it's just how we interact with one another. So, all of that to say, for those who may not know, welcome onto the journey. And for those who do know, you are familiar that I've been doing this since 2021 as I was trying to find out more about my maternal grandfather's side of the family, which I have found out since then. But and around that same time, I was also curious to know more about my father's side of the family before he had passed away. And with that being the case, I ended up putting some things together on Ancestry, and things just worked out. But the way that I really found out was just from asking my grandmother, my late grandmother, Christine Jenkins Atwell, a question. I simply just asked her who was my dad's father. Fuck, I mean, he told me his dad's name, which was, is Nathaniel Williams? Huley.
H-U-L-E-Y.
Nathaniel Huley. And he was in, Waynesboro?
Yeah.
Right.
He is in by Midville, really.
And she told me, and that's when it all started. Took us all the way back to Burke County, Georgia. Now, with that in mind, since I've met that side of the family, which are my Williams side, and I want to distinguish that in the earlier part of the video, because there's going to be a lot of parts to this video, but I want to be very clear in the beginning, just not to get you all confused. But the Williams side of the family, as I mentioned, Burke County, Florida, my paternal grandfather was Huley Williams, who passed away in 1995. Now, and with me getting to know more about my family, at some point I told one of my cousins, hey, let's have a family reunion, since I don't know any of y'all. And so my Uncle Ike, my grand Uncle Ike, which is my grandfather's last living brother, and Jerry, and so eventually got in touch with my cousin Al, and we started the planning for the family reunion. My Uncle Ike told me that he never knew much about his dad's side because my great grandfather, Nathaniel Williams, passed away in his 30s. So with that being the case, I was like, okay, well, family stories are great. And documentation is great, but one thing that is also even better than that is the DNA. With that being the case, I would ask my Uncle Ike some questions before I eventually got to have him to fill out the ancestry kit. But I would ask him, who was my great-grandfather's grandfather? That gave me some information. So as all of this is happening, and as a matter of fact, this is like around February 2025, and I have my Uncle Ike, I'm asking all these questions and trying to get some information, and I call the counties where these people live. I'm pulling up the census records, but I get to a halt, and I'm like, something's not budging. And at some point I was like, okay, hey, Uncle Ike, I need your help. If we're going to make this thing legit, can you fill out the ancestry kit for me? He does. So after months of not getting definite information, he fills out the kit. And I want to discuss how this Williams line takes a bit of a different journey through Burke County. But the totality of the Williams family history is in a separate video that you can find on here. But for now, let me just sort of set some of the groundwork so you can understand where we're getting ready to go with this information. So number one, of course, on the death certificate of my great-grandfather, Nathaniel Williams, who was a senior because he had a junior later, but it says that my great-grandfather's father was Dave Williams. And mind you, they're all around the Millen / Midville, Georgia area in Burke County. Now, I want to be very clear with this because my great-grandfather Nathaniel was born in 1908. So, but I took it back to the 1900 census records to establish some kind of framework. Number one, the 1900 census record documents Willie Williams and David Williams living in Burke County, Georgia, in Militia District 73, bordering Jefferson County and Emmanuel County in Georgia. And for those who grew up in that area, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And so it shows that they were married for 2 years. The couple had no children living in the household at the time, and there were no findings, unfortunately, of the 1910 U.S. federal census record. Now, like I said, my great-grandfather was born in 1908, so of course he's not going to appear on the 1900 census, but we don't have any documentation of him on that 1910 census because it does not exist, at least not now. However, although there are no findings of this 1910 census record, we do find a record for David Williams, who was his father, widowed at age 31, living in Georgia Militia District 111 of Jenkins County with 2 children. He has Lena Williams and he has James Williams and his widowed mother, Rhoda Williams. Now, this is interesting because it says that he's widowed at 31, which isn't all the way true. But if you go to the other video that I had on the Williams family of Burke County, you'll see why that is the case. Now, we also found another piece of information which is really necessary for us to also acknowledge. In 1920, it shows that living in the Bart Camp community of Burke County is Huley Williams, which is my great-great-grandmother, and her children, Lena Williams, Thomas Williams, and Nathaniel Williams, who is age 12. Now, this is important to note because this is the first piece of documentation that we find with Nathaniel Williams living in the household with his mother, Huley Williams. Now, okay, so I'm going to put a pin right there. Like I said, check the video out and you can get all the information on the Williams side of the family. All right, so here we are. So Uncle Ike, he completes his DNA kit. I get the results and I'm searching, and I'm trying to find some close Williams connections. And mind you, Williams is already a too common popular name, especially for Black people. I can't speak for other communities, but Williams is a lot for us. So I'm doing my research, and as I'm looking through all this information, I see a lot of close matches that Uncle Ike has, but there aren't any people who are connected to Williams, not even in their trees, showing like their grandparents. I see no Williams whatsoever. What I do see are a lot of people, a lot of first cousins and second cousins who have the last name Hammond and Artis in their family tree. So what I did was I took the information that I found, because of course, when doing this kind of thing, you always got to keep an open mind, because a lot of times people just don't know their family, or sometimes they're hiding something that is really pertinent information to our lineage. But this is a good time to find it out. So I started building the family trees and I started collecting information on both sides until I realized that I had more Hammond than Artis. That led me down the rabbit hole of sticking to the Hammond side, starting to narrow in on the potential father of my great-grandfather, Nathaniel Williams. Because mind you, at this point, I already know that Huley Williams is the mother, because DNA, on the other video, I would also document that Huley Williams, her maiden name is Willie Sampson, and there are a lot of Sampsons that I have certainly connected with in Burke County. But the Williams side, the paternal side, is where we're getting the question mark, or at least we had a question mark. So as I'm narrowing down all this information and I'm starting to see the most common name in all of these close matches in Uncle Ike's, with his matches and their trees, I keep coming across Charles Hammond. So what I do, I went back to 1900. I started looking at the census records and I started to put some things together. So this is what we have. Now keep in mind, number one, Grandpa Nathaniel was born in 1908. Now, on the 12th census, United States Census, it states that living in the family, that the Hammond family, is living in Perkins, in the Perkins community, which is in Burke County, Georgia, with William Hammonds, age 56, who is the head of the household, with Adeline Hammond, and then we also have their children, Lizzie, Charlie, Luvonia, Carrie, and their granddaughter, Ozzie Cooper. All right, so once again, we were unable to find the 1910 census record. However, for Charlie Hammond, or Charles Charlie Hammond Sr., the 1917 to 1918 U.S. World War I draft registration card places his residence in Pascal, Talbot County, Georgia, with his wife, Carrie Hammond. It'll all tie in later, so keep rolling with me. All right. The 1920 census record shows that Charlie H. Hammond is now 34, and he's living in the household with his wife, age 28, and the family is in Talbot County still, but now they're in a town called Harts with their children, Charlie H. Hammond Jr., John W. Hammond, and Carrie L. Hammond, age 7. So for those who know when it comes down to family history, just American history, the Great Migration took people out of the South and they moved to other parts of the United States. Some went to LA, depending if they were in Texas or in Arkansas. Some went to Chicago. Some went to Detroit. Some went to New York. But then there were also some who went to the Philly area. Now, eventually, during this time, we see that there is a move between 1920 and 1930 of the Hammond family to Camden, New Jersey. So in 1930, we see that the family is living in a home that's valued for $30, where Charles Hammond is the head. We have Carrie Hammond, his wife, and their sons, Charles Jr., John, Clara Hammond, their grandson, John Jr., their granddaughter, Louise, and their nephew, who is documented as a boarder, as Norman Hargrove. So 10 years later, now we're in the 1940s, we see that Charles and Carrie are the guardians for their grandson, John Jr., who is age 13. And, although by 1950, the 1950 census record does not indicate anything for Charles Hammond. However, his obituary in the Courier Post states that he died at the age of 70, and he served as a deacon at First Nazarene Baptist Church of Camden, New Jersey. So now let's reiterate some of this really quick. I want to make sure that we clear some of these things up. All right. So in 1900, Huley Williams is 19 years old and married to David Williams in the 73rd Georgia Militia District, while Charles Hammond, also 19 years old, is living in Perkins County, both living in Burke County, Georgia. 9 years old, their son, Nathaniel, was born and would take the surname of his stepfather, Williams. All right, so by this point, I'm getting mad curious because I'm like, of course, they always say when you start doing genealogy, you got to go in with an open mind. You just got to, because things happen. And this was one of those things, all right? So I go in and I'm like, all right, Emorja, so how are we going to do this? And so I'm going to read to you a timeline of things that I did. And I wanted to make sure that I documented this so I could go back later, which is now, and share this story with somebody else of how long this process takes, because it's not an overnight phenomenon. It takes time. So, mind you, our family reunion is coming up in August, and I'm trying to get all of this stuff done before then because I want to share it with my genealogist so he can confirm it. But we'll get to that. So, for example, phase 3, I'm reaching out to the Hammond family. On June 9th, here's what we have. I did a random search for the Hammond artist family, and to my surprise, I found them. And this was all on Google. I was just like looking one day. I was like, let me just see if I can just pull up something really quick to see if they have anything documented out there. And on that page listed the names that me and Uncle Ike shared on Ancestry. So what I did was I emailed 2 of the representatives from the artist family. And I was like, let me just keep looking. So I was looking through the website, and I was like, I wonder, does anybody even have like any pictures from this generation that I'm trying to, connect to, or find some kind of match? And to my surprise, I saw a picture of Carrie Hammond, who is the daughter of Charles Hammond Sr. So if you look closely here, you'll see that the picture of my great-grandfather, Nathaniel Williams Sr., looks so much like his sister, Carrie Hammond. So I'm floored because it's like, I want to share this information with my Uncle Ike because, once again, he doesn't know much about his dad's side of the family, and he's still under the impression, like the rest of the family, that Dave Williams is the biological father to my great-grandfather. So, once again, going down a rabbit hole, trying to connect these dots before the reunion. On June 11th, I went to Facebook and I sent a message to one of the people who managed the page on Ancestry. For the family reunion page for the artist family. I didn't hear back, so on June 24th, I took a chance and I texted B. She responds, and then we later have a conversation about the family. She explains the history of the artist family and how they're closely connected. On June 28th, I sent a message to my cousin, Sylvia. At the time, I didn't get a response. My cousin B was like, hey, check in with her because she may know more about the family history than I would. So I was like, okay, cool, I got you. So I did that on June 28th, didn't hear anything. So I eventually waited a little bit. Then on July 5th, I reached out to my cousin Sylvia's daughter, who is, of course, one of my other cousins. And then I didn't hear nothing then. So on June 15th, I finally heard back from my cousin Crystal after leaving a message on one of her Facebook posts to be like, hey, fam, check your DMs. So on July 16th, Tina and I, which is another cousin, we spoke on the phone that morning, and me and my cousin Sylvia, we talked for a bit. She shared with me that there is a cousin in Camden, New Jersey, who potentially has a picture of my great-grandfather's father, Charles Hammond Sr. So, on July 17th, I finally received the picture of my potential great-great-grandfather, Charles Hammond Sr. This is something I've been looking for a long time. So on July 29th, we finally have the phone conversation with a cousin in Camden, New Jersey. And this conversation includes 3 lines from Charles Hammond Sr. We have the Carrie line, the Nathaniel line, and the John Hammond line. Once again, the DNA never lies. And so as I speak with cousin Sylvia, I asked her if she would be willing to complete this ancestry kit just to confirm. And she was like, yeah. And so I shared with my genealogist, Adam, like, hey, this is what we're going to do, which was strongly supported by him because he wanted to ensure that the information he had was all that was needed to certainly confirm that Uncle Ike and cousin Sylvia were first cousins because of the shared grandparent, Charles Hammond Sr. Long story short, because I'm not going to go through his whole process, but it was confirmed that they did share the grandparent through DNA. And once again, the DNA never lies. So here's where it gets a little interesting. So Adam goes to cousin Sylvia's DNA matches on Ancestry, and he types in Burke County so he can see what matches, in fact, have this information from Burke County on their tree, especially knowing that Charles Hammond Sr. was born in Burke County. We find that there's not a large list of people that come up, and it could be because some of the descendants didn't know that they were from Burke County. Some of them only knew about Camden, New Jersey. So he compared cousin Sylvia's list to Uncle Ike's matches because, of course, they both match on Ancestry because they're related. And there is a common match that he came up with, and for safety purposes, I'm going to just say CS. So he found this match of CS, which shed light on a particular family tree. CS, both sharing about 45 centimorgans between cousin Sylvia and my Uncle Ike, indicates that there's a connection and a true relation through a shared grandparent through Adeline Thomas Jones from Georgia. Remember that name because she comes with a lot of complexities. So searching through the tree of CS, we see this name Lula Barron, a relative from Burke County, and also there's information on Sardis, Georgia, to be exact, became a person of interest. Now, she is, yes, a Caucasian woman, bearing no African ancestry whatsoever. So with this understanding, we can infer that the relationship between Uncle Ike, CS, and cousin Sylvia is through an enslaver. So considering that the Williams family is from Burke County and Lula Barron is the only documented relative of CS that descends from Burke County, this provides impetus for further research. So we're looking at the shared matches between cousin Sylvia and CS and searching for a genetic circle that links together particular groups of relatives through descent, not marriage. And there was a match that populated when searching for the surname Barron. Now, I'm going to just say MB. MB is from Australia. MB's linked family tree contains descendants Margaret Barron, born to the union of Robert Carr Barron and Mary Ellen McKee, who later settled in New Zealand. The Barron family, bearing substantial roots to Larne, Northern Ireland, has ancestry DNA matches that further confirm the linkage between Uncle Ike, cousin Sylvia, CS, MB, and DJ, both of New Zealand. Now, let's look for some proof here to ensure that all of this actually links up. Of course, during that time, no one had computers, right? So the best way people could keep information documented was by writing it down, looking at the slave records, looking at what people kept in their journals. Everything was written down, from the cost of the enslaved persons to who they belonged to what happened after someone dies. Was very significant information that helps with understanding the connections between these families as they share this property. So my genealogist, Adam, he started looking through some of the Barron family papers from Burke County, Georgia, and he finds this interesting document with Samuel Barron's name on there as the enslaver, with Louisa Barron as his daughter, also documented as the name we saw earlier, Lula Barron. So Lula and Louisa are the same person. So following Samuel's death, William Lassiter, I'm assuming a family friend or whoever, assumed the responsibility of the executor of Samuel's daughters. So before I read off these census records, let me sort of paint the picture. So the Emancipation Proclamation recently happened, and a lot of times those who were enslaved keeps the surname of the person who recently owned them until they eventually, get married and change it. So what you're going to see, because this is so close to when people were freed, you're going to see that same surname on the earliest record that I'm getting ready to show you here. In 1870, you see that Adeline Lassiter is the parent to Fanny, Isaac, and Hetty. There is no male husband or father in the household. Still, they're in Burke County. In 1880, we see that they now are in District 63 of Burke County, where Adeline is now a Hammond, and she is married to William. And in the house, they have Fanny, Isaac, Hetty, as you just saw in the previous one. So that shows that she brought those children along with her, and they also took on the surname of their stepfather. And then also in the household, we have Charles, we have Carrie, we have Jack, we have Elizabeth, and we have Sarah. Then in the 1900 census, of course, we have Adeline and William as the parents. Then we have Lizzie, Charlie, Livonia, and then Carrie Hammonds. And then 1910, we see that there's Adeline, because at this point, William Hammonds has passed away as the head of the household. And then we see Livonia, we see Norman Hammond, we see George, and Shirley May Hargrove. But things get a little bit more complicated a little bit down the line. Once again, as I said in the earlier part of the video, Adeline is a bit of a complex person, because we see her last name go from, for example, she was a part of the Barron family, which we know is through DNA. Then there's Lassiter. Then she gets married to a Hammond. But on these records, these Social Security records where her children are claiming her as the parent, we see that they have a couple of different names. That's also pretty interesting. There's Adeline Thomas, and then there's Adeline Jones. And these are, in fact, their children. So it leads us to more questions like, where did these names come from? But I want to go back to a little bit of proof that we were talking about when it came down to people who documented this information on their enslaved individuals. Now I'm going to do my best to read this, because I don't really read cursive as much anymore, but I think I still got it. So let's see what we have here. I have received of Joseph a shoemake something on the estate of the William Barron deceased, all of the lands and Negroes, and have also today received the sum of $7,170 in money, the receipt whereof is hereby acknowledges being all I. So one thing I've always been interested in finding out, or at least making happen, is connecting with those who were the enslavers to my family, which I guess essentially would also still be their family as well too. But as it relates to the experiences of these two different cultural groups, it seems as if there's a separation between their family and my family. We know how these things work out. But at the end of the day, the DNA does connect all of us. And so once again, just like I did with the artist family, I went on Google, I did a search, and I did a lot of searching for the Barron family, which there was much more information on white families, especially in general, compared to black families. So I was glad to come across something. But in that search, I came across a website that had a couple of people who were the administrators. So in early November, I reached out to the family. I said, hey, this is what's happening. I came across your website and I shared with them the information that I gained with my genealogist and also from researching. And I got in touch with Vicky and Christine, who shared very similar stories when it came down to the Barron side, but still very separated. However, we were able to find some linchpins as I shared with them the truths of what Adam found and the knowledge of what they had. And we put it together and we're able to create some kind of holistic truth. Now, there are still some parts that are missing, but I'm going to read to you a little bit of what we came across. So, for example, when it came down to Grandma Adeline, I was curious because now, mind you, I've never gotten this far back when it comes down to this side of the family. And I've never gotten to the point where I was able to speak with a family that was directly connected to the enslavers family, because a lot of times they have records and information that we as African Americans are not privy to having because our history just was not kept up as much. And once again, the DNA does not lie. As we're doing this, I say, hey, I think, that perhaps, William Barron could be the father. So the challenge is, when it comes down to this, because it's so many generations removed, sometimes getting that information can be a little challenging because not all of the men who carry a certain kind of chromosome are alive. So one thing that Adam came across in our research as we were trying to find out more information about Adeline, of course, as the papers told us one thing, we saw the Samuel Barron, then also potential for William Barron as well. I was sharing with the family, I said, hey, who do we think the potential father would be for Grandma Adeline? And so Cousin Vicky, she was saying, well, if Adeline was, fathered by a Barron, she gave me like an idea. So for example, there'd be my Uncle Ike, there'll be his father, which is Nathaniel Williams, and there'll be Charles Hammond, Adeline Thomas Jones, William Barron, or Samuel Barron, and then their father was William Barron, and then possibly another William Barron. So as you see, William Barron is a pretty complex name. There's so many of them, so you have to differentiate them by the years they were born, and when they died. Christina, I'm curious because of where we're sitting. There's of course Uncle Ike, and there's also Cousin Sylvia, and we're funneling through this Hammond line. Can you share with us if you know or have any idea as to, would you happen to know who the father of Adeline is?
I would go with it's a Barron. It would be William. I don't know, but by age, and I did think Henry, but he's too young.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I don't know. It could have been William's brother.
So as Cousin Vicky was telling me that although there's a strong potential that it could be on either of those lines, it gets a little challenging because one thing about it, we can certainly confirm that Uncle Ike is part of the Robert Carr Barron line, or I'll say that he connects to a lot of the descendants of the Robert Carr Barron line. However, after, she shared with me, after 20 years of researching, they haven't found a living male Barron descendant of the Burke County Barron line to take the Y-DNA test. And so Y-DNA testing is a bit different from autosomal testing and is considered to be the golden standard for identifying and sorting through the family lines. Y-DNA focuses on the Y chromosome that's passed down from father to son over the many generations, which pretty much is virtually unchanged. And the Y-DNA testing tells us absolutely which Barron family that individual belongs to. So only males carry this Y-DNA. So that's why it's so important to get the men in your family to take these tests. And so she was able to trace back to many of the Barron branches up to the 1940s, and all of the lines she followed either died out or they daughtered out. I am glad to know that I have a family who also supports that mission. And plus, I want to pass this information down to my children, and I hope my children will pass it down to theirs as well. Once again, if you want to know more, you got to do the work. Don't let all these secrets die, because once they die, it's really hard to resurrect this stuff. Some people take a lot of this to their grave and leave a lot of us with more questions than answers. And if people don't always agree with you wanting to do the research on your family, which is also their family, it's okay. Do it for yourself. Because I guarantee you, when you start finding information that is quite pertinent, the people who didn't want you to do it in the beginning will also be the ones to be like, oh my gosh, I remember this. How did you find this out? And it's because you searched and you didn't let their anger or their frustration become your hindrance, but instead you used it as your catalyst. I hope you enjoyed the story. As I find out more, I will share with you. All right. Follow me for more information. You can follow me on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. Check out my music. And I hope you all take it easy. Love you all. Be safe out there in them streets. I'm out. Love y'all.